Hello and welcome to another motorcycling video. This is the third instalment in the travelling around the countryside around Launceston ride. And for the first part of this ride I'll still be on the Bass Highway heading back in the general direction of Launceston, but about 7 minutes in I'll turn off the Bass Highway onto Illawarra Road, which takes you to Longford, and then on to, you can go to Hobart that way, but also to the small township of Perth. And towards the end of the video I'll be going through some cuttings that are part of the overpass for the Perth bypass, which was a new road built I think in 2020 to bypass the little village or township of Perth, so that people heading south didn't actually have to go through the town on their way to all points south, Campbelltown, but particularly Hobart. The benefit of that, of course, was that traffic going didn't have to go through the village or the township, and so for people in the town it made life a lot easier, a lot quieter, and for the traffic, of course, it speeded up the trip by a few minutes. I'm not exactly sure how much, but by a few minutes. Certainly I think that the people who live in Perth and the people who go there to visit, because there are lots of interesting buildings and historic buildings and churches and things like that, would find that the quality of life has improved dramatically. And as I saw when I was riding through the village, which will be in the next clip, there's been an explosion in housing and subdivisions and small estates in Perth now that it's a much quieter town. So it's still commuter distance from Launceston. I suspect most of the people who live in Perth commute to Launceston or one of Launceston's suburbs for work, but it's far enough away to be considered sort of out of town, and a bit land values are lower and so on. So all of that is before you, and at the moment we're on the Bass Highway and you can see the state of the road. It's not a dual carriageway at the moment, but it's well marked. The tree line is quite a ways back from the road, which is good. I might have commented, I've commented in some of my other videos in relation to roads in New South Wales that some of the times the tree line can be very close to the edge of the road on small rural roads, and gives you a sort of closed-in feeling. But not only that, it creates a lot of sort of dappled light on the road, which sometimes can be a bit disconcerting in terms of shadows and making out what's on the road, and especially animals that may be coming out into the road. But this section of the road is well marked, and you can see lines on either side, white guideposts, markings down the middle. It's the major road between Devonport and Launceston, so you would expect it to be well marked, and there are parts of it that are dual carriageway, but just not this section. So I thought what I'd do this time, rather than just rabbit on about the road forevermore, is talk about something a bit different. In the last couple of ones we've talked about the costs of motorcycling and so on, and this time I thought I'd talk about something that is a phenomenon that I've noticed in Launceston, and in doing some research for this video I've discovered that it exists in other cities as well, and that is the electric scooter phenomenon. Now I don't know if you're familiar with this in your city or in your town, but in Launceston there are two providers who are providing electric scooters, and I think one of them has there are two companies, say Beam, which run the purple ones, and Neuron, which run the orange ones. Neuron is a company based in Singapore. I'm not sure where Beam is originally from, but I think some of its directors had Asian names, and I'm just making that observation, so not drawing any conclusions from it. So I think they may well be based in Singapore as well, or somewhere in Southeast Asia. What happened is that the Tasmanian government amended the regulations sometime in late 2020 or early 2021 to allow both Launceston and Hobart to trial these electric scooters. How they work is relatively simple. You download an app onto your phone. Everything that happens these days on phones and on apps. You download an app onto your phone and you link a card by which you want to pay for the use of the scooter to that app. And then you find a scooter for whichever company you have the app for, and you scan the QR code with your phone, obviously, and then the scooter is unlocked. And in the case of the orange ones, it not only unlocks the scooter, it unlocks the helmet clamp so that you can then put the helmet on, because wearing a helmet is mandatory. The cost of unlocking the orange scooter costs you $1, and then they are charged at a rate of 45 cents per minute. The purple ones run by Beam. There apparently is no charge at the moment, as far as I can see, for unlocking the scooter, but they also charge you at 45 cents a minute. Now, the idea is that you get on this scooter and you go wherever you want, subject to certain conditions, which I'll explain in a moment. And then I assume that you log out of the app, and your usage bill is then debited, or payment for how much you've used the scooter for is taken against your card. They're electric. You have to be over 16 years of age according to their websites to use them, although somewhere it does say 18 years of age, but the website certainly says 16 years of age. The default speed is 15 kilometres per hour, but that can be increased to up to 25 kilometres per hour, subject again to certain conditions. Now, the idea of the scooter is that you find one, you do all those things to unlock it, get on it, go where you want to go, then you step off it and you leave it where you found it. They have stands. Their idea is that you sort of park it so it doesn't block the footpath or wherever, and then somebody else can come and get on it and take it somewhere else. Because they're electric, they recharge somehow, but I haven't been able to find out how that is. Wherever you leave it, there are no charges. I can't see any charging stations anywhere in Launceston for them. And they talk about, the research I've done talks about there being people who maintain them, but I can't see that it would be economically viable for someone to ride around every day and pick up all the scooters and take them somewhere and recharge them, or even swap the batteries out. It's claimed that the orange ones at least have a range of 60 kilometres, so I imagine that the purple ones would have a similar range because they're about the same size. You are allowed to use them on bike paths, on footpaths, on cycleways, in places where pedestrians are allowed, and on local roads. You're not allowed to use them on any road that has a speed limit over 50 kilometres an hour. So obviously you couldn't take them on the highway, and there may be certain other defined paths and trails, for example through the city park, you may not be able to use them, and they're not allowed to be used in the CBD. Now, for those who live in Launceston and know Launceston as a town or a city, they are available to be used in the areas from around Riverbend Park, which is down in Inveresk, close to the CBD but not in the CBD, and then up the northeast side of the Tamar River to as far as Newnham. I've seen them in Mowbray and Mayfield and Newnham, which is about 6 kilometres from Riverbend Park, and they're also allowed to be used in places like Newstead, Elphin and Invermay. Now, Newstead would probably be about a similar distance, 4 to 5 kilometres maybe, from Riverbend Park, and that's the only areas that they are trialling them in at the moment. So, I mean, you can't get on it and go from Riverbend Park to Kingsmeadow. You can't get on one and go from Riverbend Park to Trevelyan or Riverside or somewhere like that. And how that is enforced is that the scooters have a built-in GPS system, and they also have what is called geofencing. And the GPS system means that the owners of the scooters can monitor the scooters and know exactly where they are at all times, apparently. So if you find one blocking your driveway or somewhere that you don't want it to be, you can call the company and quote the number, and you can say where it is and they'll find it for you and come and move it or whatever. If you find one abandoned somewhere, you can again call the company with the number and they will be able to pinpoint where it is. There are certain restrictions on where these scooters can be parked, and they cannot be parked near waterways, so that when I was doing the research, I read an article in the Examiner about some gentlemen who threw 3 or 4 of those scooters into the river, and it took 6 hours for the company to get down at the boardwalk near the cataract, near the ticket office for the little cruises that go up and down the Tamar. And it took the company about 6 hours to get those scooters out of the water. The gentlemen involved have been banned from ever riding a scooter again, and were also fined, and it looked like they're facing police prosecution. So they're banned from being parked near waterways. They're also banned at certain other areas. And how the GPS system, as I explained, tells the company where it is. The geofencing system means that if you attempt to ride into an area where the scooters are not allowed, such as the CBD, there are built-in sensors in the scooter that it knows that it's in an area that it's not supposed to be, and it simply stops working. If you ride it in an area where the speed limit is above, or try to attempt to ride it on a road where the speed limit is above 50, the geofencing system again would stop the scooter from working. Now, both scooters claim to be fitted with dangerous driver behaviour monitors, so that if you're doing something dumb like trying to chuck a wheelie or going too fast or whatever, the scooter will stop operating. You'll be notified that you are behaving in a dangerous manner, and ultimately you'll be fined, I guess, by the company who own the scooter, and that'll be deducted from the card that you've linked to your account for the use of the scooter, and ultimately you will be banned from hiring the scooters. As I said, the default speed for them is 15 kilometres an hour, but they can travel up to 25 kilometres an hour. Now, I guess if you think about it, the way I think about it is this. Although they're not allowed in the CBD, they still make a sensible option for some people commuting from some of the suburbs, those on the northeast or the southeast of the CBD, to somewhere close to the CBD where the scooter can be left and then they could walk. Now, for example, if you live in Newnham, which, as I said, is about 6 kilometres from the CBD, or 6 kilometres from Riverbend Park, which is a good parking spot for the scooters, you could get a scooter from your house down to Riverbend Park, leave it there, and then walk through Riverbend Park and across the pedestrian bridge and be at your office in, or wherever it is you work in the CBD in a few minutes. Now, when you factor in all the costs of buying a car or buying a motorbike or something like that, owning it, registering it, insuring it, putting petrol in it, having it maintained and all that, the 45 cents a minute cost of travelling on the scooter from Newnham, actually I said 6 kilometres from the CBD, at 15 kilometres an hour you get there in a few minutes. The cost of paying the 45 cents per minute would be much cheaper than all the costs associated with owning a car and driving a car and paying the parking. Even if you drove down to the new car park behind UTAS Stadium and parked your car there, it's $4 a day, and then got the Tiger bus to your work, I still think you would probably end up saving money overall when you factor in all those associated costs of owning a car and so on. Now, the idea of these electric scooters, and one of the companies, the Neuron, who own the orange ones, claim that they are certified 100% carbon neutral. And what that means is, I guess, that they say, since the scooters are electric and have no emissions, that the process by which they manufacture and transport the scooters to Australia, I'm not sure if they're made in Australia or they're made elsewhere. I assume they're made overseas and transported to Australia, but I'm assuming that their claim of carbon neutral means that the amount of carbon that they create in making the scooter and moving it to Australia is offset by the fact that the scooter has no emissions. And why that's important is that if we're ever going to meet our commitments under various international treaties to do something about carbon emissions and global warming and so on, and this is not really a forum to discuss that, but if we're ever going to meet our commitments under those various treaties and obligations and so on, then anything that we can do in regard to personal transport to reduce those emissions is a good thing. Now, if you live in Launceston and you come from the northeastern suburbs down the East Tamar Highway, or Mowbray link in towards the city centre, when you get to those traffic lights at Foster and Goodrich Street, and then the next lot at, I think it's Gleedow Street, or Gleedow Street, and then the next lot at Lindsay Street, and then you cross the Charles Street Bridge, and then there's another lot just in front of the seaport, and then another lot where the courthouse, where the court buildings are. It can be bumper to bumper traffic along there. Now, traffic jams are relative, and traffic congestion is relative to wherever you live. Obviously it's not as bad as living in Hobart, and obviously it's not as bad as living in, say, Sydney or Melbourne, but it's a relative thing that people have to factor into their time when they're trying to get to work. So if you were travelling on one of these scooters, you would not be subject to all that stuff because you're on the footpath. Granted, they're not going to be very practical in winter time, and they're certainly not going to be very practical in wet weather unless you are prepared to, put on a set of wet weather gear, or I think you need two hands to operate the thing, because there's one hand operates the throttle and the other hand operates the brake. So you obviously can't hold an umbrella with one, but you would have to put on some wet weather gear, and if you were going to ride it in wet weather. When I was talking about charging, in terms of how much it costs, rather, I should have mentioned that one of the Orange company, Neuron, and I'm not spruiking them, it's just they have more information available about their rates and so on, is that you can get a 3-day pass, which is $25 a day, and that allows you up to 90 minutes per day for the 3 days, or for a weekly pass $33, or for a monthly pass for $43. As I said, that allows you 90 minutes per day, and you can go wherever you want and use the bike, a scooter, as many times as you want over the 90 minutes, and still incur that charge. And I guess that the unlocking charge, I think this is what I read, the unlocking charge is not charged if you have one of these extended passes. So that's something that I've noticed in Launceston. I know when I did the research, they're also available in Adelaide, in a particular part of Canberra, and also in part of Brisbane. So the idea of I think they're referred to as personal mobility transport, or personal mobility something or other like that, as another option for getting people